we've known each other since high school. This was 14 years ago, so it was back when swing dancing was like sort of this craze, and so like
this whole group
went to the Derby to go swing dancing, and I was the first person there, and then Josh was the second person there, and so we just sort of coincidentally just kind of came together, and that was the first night where we had a long conversation, and I was like, oh, you know, Josh is really interesting, and he never left my side the whole night, although he did not ask me to dance, and I was disappointed. And then he asked me if I would drive him home that night, so I did.
All right.
And then I dropped him off, and then my car broke down, and I couldn't leave.
I had actually noticed Ronni before that, and then I thought, oh, this is maybe nifty, and then Ronni left, and then like 5 minutes later, there was a knock at the door, and I opened it, and Ronnie's like, oh, I'm stuck here. And so then I was like, oh, well, sure, you know, come on in. And then
nothing happened other than we just stayed up all night long, and Josh told me all of these stories. That was my first glimpse of sort of like the kind of storyteller that he is. And so
I had just been in Israel, so he
had just done this dig in Israel, and so he like told me all about what that was like, and I just thought it was amazing. We got engaged in year
11.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I remember because when I proposed, I said something about sort of the 11-year cooling off period has expired. So it was in year 11, well, because we were engaged for 18 months, and we got married about 18 months ago. So, and we're in year 14, so that works out with the math. But I don't really remember. We started dating that we're so young that marriage wasn't something you know.
Marriage was not something that we talked about until much, much later. And even when we talked about it later, it didn't seem like an important thing.
Yeah.
I for sure was very conflicted at the beginning, thinking about having a wedding. So if there had been another option, yes. I was really opposed to having a traditional wedding. I do not understand why everybody's wedding has to look the same. I don't understand the cookie cutter ritual of it. Looking like a princess was the opposite of what I wanted to do.
So then we sort of struggled trying to figure out what we were going to do for quite some time, like on the internet. Like, what if we do this weird thing? Or what if we
go to the Amazon? What if we go to Thailand and you know, whatever?
And then we got this opportunity to go to Africa on this safari, basically, to join on a safari and then get married while we were there.
We did not bring family. We had decided fairly early on that we were going to elope. So we really consider what we did going to Kenya as eloping, even though what we ended up with was a true wedding. Also, Josh is Jewish. I was raised Catholic. That's a big deal to both of our parents. So there was like this religious aspect that wasn't necessarily important to us, but
so we had like
would have been upset.
Yeah.
You know?
So instead, we just went out and we had a polygamist, animist ceremony in the Great Rift Valley of Kenya. Kenyans called from Kenya and said, okay, so you're going to get married. It was like the wedding planner was all of a sudden
it was like a 15-minute phone call with the safari outfit saying, you know, hey, what's important to you about this wedding? Like, what do you absolutely need to have it be your wedding? And I had very little requirements. It's funny because they actually did they incorporated a lot of Western traditions in our wedding that I didn't ask for, that I didn't really want, you know, like the tossing of the bouquet or things like that, where all of that was so unimportant. But we had a little bit of it in the ceremony. But then it was funny because it was like such a mixed up ceremony that it sort of worked.
Very funny.
But basically the first phone call was just like, oh, I'd like chocolate cake. I really like this type of flower, you know, whatever, like very basic details, and that was it. So we got married the first day that we were in Africa, so it was like we just like walked into our own wedding. We were in this new place, this new culture, And it was true. It was really wonderful.
Well, there's all those warriors and also there's like a whole sort of contingent of local Maasais there, and there's warriors and the girls are singing and the warriors are all there.
And they were dressed up. A lot of them are wearing,
Yeah.
a lion mane, ostrich feathers or a colobus monkey, tail or whatever it was, like
It's hats
animals
made out of
animals that they had killed, and then they were sort of because it was a special
That's
occasion.
kind of like their special, like their usual, the beads, the basic tribal outfit sort of stays the same, and then for the ceremonial purposes, then they kind of break out the lion mane hats and stuff. So you could kind of, this is what was explained to us. And then there was the sort of a local chief guy, although from what I understood it was a little bit unclear, but the Maasai don't have chiefs, but there was a guy who sort of was speaking for them, but he spoke English, so he was able to
kind of translate the whole time.
Kind of go, and a couple of them took a real sort of, were really intrigued by us, and we were obviously intrigued by them, and so there was simultaneously this kind of big.
It was truly like this
experience.
Exchange about like, oh, this is what a wedding is like for us.
Yeah.
And sort of looking to us like, what's it like for you? And, and sort of this exchange, which I thought was really great.
We were doing it in such a way where we were kind of taking a step back and thinking what it means in this real fundamental way, because then we were doing it in the setting with all these people for whom marriage means something, very different, much more fundamental. This is how they've been married for like whatever, 20,000 years, God knows how long, And I mean, this is also the place, Kenya, right where we were, is where the species developed.
Yeah, the birthplace of humanity.
Yeah.
So.
And so it kind of, the layers of sort of import, you could kind of take a step back at will and really think about it, and it made it really a lot more meaningful, I would say.
We've been so successful because we've just given each other a lot of freedom.
Yeah, I would say that's true. In fact, the only time we kind of had a little bit of a problem was because Ronni wasn't giving me enough freedom.
I don't even know what he's talking about.
Well, like after I was covering in 2004 when I was covering the presidential campaign, I was gone for on and off for like 6 months, and you're like, you're just never around anymore. Right. And I was like, well, listen, that's life on the road.
Yeah.
With a journalist.
Yeah. But we do,
I have to say that also, Ronni is the most sort of flexible and patient, like just beyond anything that I can really imagine that most people would provide. So it makes it very easy for me to be.
Well, because we have very different personalities, and Josh is the type of person that needs to be out in the world. He's not at home a lot. He forgets to call and say that he's coming home. It's a lot of that.
That's true.
Which is fine, and I'm like much more of a homebody, and so I think
Ronnie's like the home base, like the mothership. See?
Right, I'm the
and
home
then I
base.
go out and exploring different missions.
And if he disappears or forgets to call or something, that can be very maddening. But we sort of have like our core values are so similar that then these other differences kind of don't matter or even help, because I see Josh doing something very differently than I would, and maybe I'll learn something from that, or maybe it's very frustrating. It just depends.